let's talk about something else which deals with the Bethesda autopsy and which gets much closer to the heart of best evidence. When Air Force One comes to a halt at Andrews Air Force Base, in best evidence, I pointed out that although the ambulance comes up to the port side, on the starboard side, we hear the sounds of a chopper, and we know there's a chopper there because in the NBC log they talk about a chopper and somebody in real time, and I should get all these tapes together. We can do a body alteration workshop next year, and I'd be glad to be involved in that. And there's a chopper there, and you can see the chopper in some footage, and it's a very dramatic moment because if the evidence I present in best evidence is correct, the coffin on board Air Force One is empty. The body has been taken out. I postulated in my book that it was aboard Air Force One in luggage, but that I went to the radio transmissions, the official radio transmissions on the starboard side. They said they want a ramp. We hear a chopper. We see it under the belly of the plane. Just look at this scene for a minute, and you get a sense. Just play it.
Well, between Parkland and Bethesda, he was placed in a body bag.
This is one of the most unique and tragic moments in the history of Andrews Air Force Base.
The casket was different and the wrapping was different. But how could anything have been secretly changed? Wasn't Mrs. Kennedy always with the casket? She was, but unknown to her, the body was elsewhere. It did not arrive in the gray Navy ambulance that took Mrs. Kennedy and the ceremonial casket to Bethesda.
Now the ramp is being slowly
See that chopper back there? Okay, keep going. Keep going.
Casket. And a gray U.S. Navy ambulance has pulled into sight and is now directly in front of the ramp in which the casket still rests.
Okay, that's it. Cut.
Dennis, after all...
Now, play the next, I think we should play the next cut. Play the next thing just for a minute. Yeah, just play it, right.
Dennis, after all these years, how can you be certain the vehicle at the back was black?
Well, that's one of the things I remembered because Navy ambulances or military ambulances traditionally are gray. And I remember that night that it was black because it wasn't gray.
Because it wasn't a military...
It wasn't a military vehicle.
Was it normal for non-military vehicles to put the loading dock?
No, not normally.
Okay, you can cut.
Dennis David...
Now, the point is, Dennis David was officer of the day. He was back there with his men. He unloaded from a Blackhurst, a shipping casket, brought into the autopsy room. With him was Donald Rebentish, who came forward. The week best evidence was published. I interviewed him. I'm going to get him now on camera, I hope. And these two guys are direct witnesses to bringing in a shipping casket to the Bethesda autopsy room. Now, I've tried to reconstruct this and figure out how did the body get from Dallas to Washington, and what is this business with the Blackhurst, and how does it get from Andrews, if that's where it arrived, to Bethesda? And clearly, there's a very significant issue here having to do with a chopper, because you see the chopper on the footage. We have radio transmissions that call for a chopper on the starboard side. They say the First Lady is going off by that route. It was very suspicious sounding. And, of course, she didn't. She comes off on the port side. And there's lots of talk about helicopters on the radio transmissions. Well, and again, it's because I wrote best evidence, and I'm so happy about this in the sense that my mailbox has become an inbox. I was contacted some years ago by a professor of history at a university who said, I have a student, and this student's in a math class, and the person who's teaching this class, who was retired, this was in high school or something, or his sister was in the math class, was the chopper pilot that met Air Force One. So I've had this information for several years, and I was wondering what to do with it. I heard the whole story, I knew the whole story, but it was only recently that I decided that even though I'm writing this book on Oswald, and even though everybody's mad at me that it's late, life is finite, we're all mortal. If I don't get these guys, who's going to get their story? So I went and got the chopper pilot, who for the purposes of this lecture, I'm not going to identify by name because there's more work to be done with him, but I call him the Utah chopper pilot. He's a devout Mormon. He lives in a tiny town I'd never heard of before, and I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago. And I'd now like to show you excerpts from his interview, because the consequence of this interview is really important to my theory and how it has been evolving over the years as to how this body got from Dallas to Washington. So play the Utah chopper tape. There's one sloppy edit where I had to cut out his name. I can't reveal his name right now.
Okay, I'll try to review this 33 years later.
Stop for a minute. Stop for a minute. I want to back up on something. The President of the United States, as well as the line of succession, whether you guys know it or not, and I suppose we'll take it for granted, has chopper support. In other words, the President, the Vice President, the Speaker of the House, maybe the Supreme Court, I'm not sure exactly how many of the top officials, they can snap their fingers, and in a national emergency, there's a chopper ready to take them to a secret location in case the balloon goes up. That is, in case there's an incoming missile or a national emergency. Now, they can be taken to these places, then they have 24-hour chopper support. And this is called the HMX Squadron. And these guys fly out of Quantico, Virginia, the Marine choppers, and they also fly out of Anacostia Naval Air Station. This is the fellow who was assigned a task on November 22nd. He had become free. He thought he was going home for a little while because President Kennedy was off to Texas. So let's back it up and just start the whole thing again and let him tell a story. Go on.
I have the notes from what he told us to Piercy. November 22nd. Tell us what happened that day. That is, start at the beginning. You get up in the morning, and I have the notes from what he told us to Piercy.
Okay, I'll try to review this 33 years later. I was at Anacostia,
Yeah.
hot team for the president.
Yeah.
And we're on that type of a mission for 48 hours, and then we're off for 48, and some other team takes on. So we were there about the first day of a hot team mission for the president. Well, as soon as he takes off in Air Force One, we go cold.
Right.
And we were looking forward to that. And as soon as he took off on Air Force One, we went cold, and he wasn't going to be back for a day, so we could come back home to be with our families. So the staff car came up
That's chunk one. Just have to put up with my edits, and here's chunk two. I want you to know who he is.
to leave to get into my car and go home. And just as I opened the door, it was Major Young. He was the operations officer. He came into the ready room and he says, Captain...
I had to cut out his name. I'm sorry, but I didn't have sophisticated equipment to drop the audio.
So I went into the briefing, to the operations room, and a very, very surreptitious brief was given to me that I was to take a helicopter and go to Andrews Air Force Base and await the arrival of Air Force One, and that the body of President Kennedy would be placed on the aircraft, and we would fly him to Bethesda Naval Hospital. That's where he...
Now, let me ask you a question. Who is going to be your co... just to have a second take on it.
Okay.
Tell me about the brief. And what time was it? What time was this brief, roughly?
Oh, I'd say the brief was about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that.
Had the president been pronounced dead by that time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. You're to await, take one of the VIP helicopters
VIP.
and to fly to Andrews Air Force Base, land there, be as unobtrusive as possible, and await the arrival of Air Force One. And your mission is to take his body to Bethesda Naval Hospital.
Your flight to Andrews, and what happened?
Okay, we took off, and I can't tell you the exact time. It took us about a half an hour, 45 minutes. We landed at Andrews on the west taxiway, behind the trees, taxied in, and there was a nice blind area there near the terminal, the passenger terminal at Andrews, where we just shut down the aircraft. It was late afternoon, just toward sunset when we arrived and shut down. I can remember that because the sun was red. You know, it was kind of in the process of setting. So when he's on landing, on his landing, we, at that time when we know he's landed, we turn the rotors up. The engine has been going. We turn the rotors up. It's dark then, okay? All the spotlights and the strobes and everything are sat out there on the mat. You've got all of the major news media out there, and I don't know how many everybody else, but waiting for Air Force One to come in.
Right.
Now, part of my brief that I didn't tell you was that I was to stay out of the view of what was going on.
Yeah.
Okay, that I was to taxi to the tail of the Air Force One, staying out of the lights, and await them to bring the casket down.
Let me ask you a question.
And
Were you
that
given
says
any
casket then,
explanation as to
right.
why they wanted you to stay out of the view of the lights and taxi
No,
the tail?
no,
Did you ask?
didn't ever ask. No.
Did you have any curiosity about it?
Well, there was, you know, there was all sorts of feelings that there's some type of conspiracy going on. There needed to be, I guess, maximum security that you could have so that whoever was masterminding this, if it was a masterminded type of a thing, wouldn't know where his casket was going. Now, as they offloaded,
Bring us, do this slowly.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's cover the moment.
okay, so the Air Force One taxis in, all right? The lights are all on Air Force One.
Right.
I taxi out from where I am. I'm to the a little bit to the east of where he is, and I just taxi back about maybe 100 feet from where the tail is. They were to take him down out of the
Let me interrupt
back.
for a moment. You're on the starboard side or the port side of the
It'd be the starboard side.
Right, 'cause it's
Starboard, and they were on the port side. That's where all the press was. Okay, they were facing east.
Right.
So I'm coming out of the west. They don't, no lights. That was another thing. No lights
No lights on what?
on the aircraft. No.
On your aircraft?
No, on my
Okay, let's
aircraft.
start over again. Say this again. You were told to taxi up. Explain it in your own words again.
Taxi up, no lights.
Yeah.
Keep the lights off.
Yeah.
Stay out of the spotlights as much as possible.
Right.
So I was in a darkened area where I was when I taxied up there.
And for me, being an novice, the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's go. What happened? So you taxied up on the starboard side.
More.
Turned inboard toward where the crowd is. I could see everything that's going on, so that when they brought that casket aboard, it would come into the door, doorway into the aircraft.
May I ask you a question here? What door did you expect this large casket to be offloaded from? Because the large door is on the port side. So my question to you sort of is, how did you expect, as you approached tactically, to see this large coffin coming off your side?
There's a ramp.
You see, the big door is on the port side.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, you're on the starboard side, I understand, because I've seen footage with the chopper back there. How did you expect this coffin to be gotten onto your...
I don't know. That wasn't my I just expected that to happen, that's all.
But you know there's no door. Sorry, the plane has now come to a halt, so
Okay.
pick us up from that moment
Okay.
and just tell
Now,
us.
there's another helicopter there. It'd be Army One.
Right,
They're there to pick up President Johnson.
yes.
And they are more out toward the, they would be out more toward where the mat was, where the action is.
Sure.
And now I'm not in the action.
What do you mean by the action?
where everything is happening.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And as the dignitaries get off the aircraft, I spot Jackie Kennedy coming down, and then I see the casket. When they bring it down and they put it into the Navy gray hearse.
Yes.
I watched them put it in. Now that surprised me. But it shouldn't have surprised me because there's always a backup. There was always some type of backup.
Right.
Perhaps I was the backup
Right.
and didn't know it. But as soon as they put that in the hearse, and as soon as they shut the hearse's door, they had a motorcycle escort. They must have had 16 motorcycles escort that. And as soon as they left, I taxied out, requested clearance for takeoff, and returned to Quantico, Virginia. That was the end of that mission.
When were you first...
Okay, cut. Thank you. Now, at first you say, and if you're a believer in the Warren Report, you say, wait a minute, this is just a dog that doesn't bark. This guy goes to the starboard side. He's given this brief, the surreptitious brief to get the body and fly it. The radio transmissions say Walter Reed. May I remind you that Lyndon Johnson's secretary, writing on her handwriting in time-dated notes, say 5:58, that's 2 minutes before that plane is coming in for landing, 5:58, body to Walter Reed. They're talking on the radio about Walter Reed. There's this chopper. Okay, he's told Bethesda, but he assured me you can fly anywhere in the capital. He knows the thing cold. And he appears there, and there's no body. Well, what's going on here? I would just like to play for you the sound. If we just had this transferred, I want to just, you hear this, another view of Air Force One arriving with the chopper in the background, the chopper flown by the witness whose interview I showed you excerpts of. And by the way, his radio call sign, just like JFK was Lancer, his call sign was Nighthawk 1. So you can see the NBC footage. This is unedited. I got this some 10 years ago. Thanks a lot, Robert, for getting this transcript. This is Air Force One as recorded by the NBC camera. Now, the first thing you're going to see is Lyndon's chopper taking off. I reverse the scenes. I want you to see what a chopper sounds like on this, in this camera POV. As Lyndon Johnson's chopper takes off, and we'll go back to the beginning of the sequence. This is Johnson's chopper taking off, Army 1. So this is about 6:20 or 6:15 or whatever. Now he's flying a Marine chopper. Now here's Air Force One coming in for a landing. And you'll hear Nighthawk 1 in the background, and you see the fact there's a chopper there. You can see some of the lights. He's taxiing. Okay, see the lights back there? Okay, I just want to show you from the camera angle. Huh? Yes, he did. Okay, you can cut it. I wish I could tell you that, I wish I had the interview and he said, and I took the body too. I mean, I'm now looking for other chopper pilots. I might add that at the end of this wonderful afternoon spent in Utah a few weeks ago, he said, he had several tours in Vietnam and he flew all these dangerous missions, and he said, and his house is opposite this gorgeous Mormon temple. And he said, I built my house to remember, at its location, to remember who I am and what I'm really on Earth for. So I said, I'd love to get your original log. He has a mission to Andrews. And he had these things stamped, original orders and everything. So he just handed them to me. He just trusted me. So I've got them now. I'm photographing him. I'm going to turn him over to the ARRB. I've told him about the ARRB. I hope he's called as a witness. So we have a little time for Q&A. And Dave, you want to come up here and we'll answer any questions.
For David, did you ask the Mormon gentleman?
Two Davids here. So David Lifton, David Manning.
Lifton. Did you ask the Mormon gentleman, and I don't remember in the videotape, if he was watching anything that was going on as far as the Air Force One at all? He didn't see anything. Did he see another chopper? Did he?
No, he's the only, there's no question. It is absolutely unambiguous. He is the only chopper. He is briefed to go there. He's the only one on the starboard side, and the only other thing there is Army One stuff on the on the port side forward of the aircraft where the dignitaries get on. So there's no other chopper but him and the guys that one you just saw that take off with the NBC